Hello and welcome. For Robert Anton Wilson, beliefs were central to how human beings experience reality. Wilson argued that belief is not only an intellectual choice, but a neurological function that shapes perception itself. The world you think you live in is directly influenced by the beliefs you hold, whether you are conscious of them or not. Understanding how beliefs work is, in his view, one of the keys to understanding the human condition. Wilson once wrote that belief marks the end of intelligence. By this, he did not mean that it is wrong to hold opinions, or that one should drift aimlessly through life without convictions. Nor did he mean that we can verify every detail of reality for ourselves. That would be impossible. Much of life requires us to take things on trust. What he meant is that the moment you become absolutely certain, you stop asking questions. Here, it helps to clarify what belief actually means. Properly understood, a belief contains a degree of uncertainty. A belief held lightly, without attaching too much importance to it, was not the kind Wilson criticized. What he found problematic were the kinds of beliefs mistaken for facts, the ones clung to as absolute truth. This type of belief freezes inquiry. Once you have decided you know how things are, the need to keep thinking seems to vanish. In that sense, belief narrows the range of what you are able to perceive. Instead of staying open to the world's complexity, the mind contracts around its chosen framework. Wilson also argued that we never encounter reality in any final or absolute sense. Once this is understood, it is self-evident. What we actually have access to are our own subjective experiences, shaped by the models we place on them. In other words, we perceive the world through filters built into our neurology and nervous system. We never meet the world as it is directly. Our senses, brain, and language process everything first. Light strikes the eyes, sound reaches the ears. But what we experience is not raw input. It is the brain's translation of those signals into a coherent picture, a model already shaped by our biology, habits, and beliefs. So when Wilson says we deal with perceptions filtered through our nervous systems, he's pointing out that even our most basic sense of reality is mediated. We never step outside of those filters to compare our model with some raw, final version of that which is filtered through our senses and minds. Beliefs act as an extra layer of filtering on top of what our nervous system already does. First, biology and language shape raw perception into a workable model. Then, beliefs decide how we interpret and organize that model, which again is processed through language, often shaped by emotions. For example, two people might see the same event, but their different beliefs guide them to notice different details, assign different meanings, and even remember it differently. In other words, our beliefs tend to lock us into one particular version of reality. That's why Wilson insists on model agnosticism. Since everything we experience is already filtered, the healthiest approach is to hold beliefs lightly and treat them as provisional maps rather than absolute truths. This is not to say that all beliefs are created equal. Wilson's work was not about flat relativism. In Prometheus Rising and Quantum Psychology, he stresses that beliefs function like tools or software programs. Some tools are more comprehensive and more consistent with the data we have. Some open up more flexibility, creativity, and freedom. Others trap you in narrow, rigid tunnels. Some expand perception and possibilities, while others limit them. A belief that the world is full of enemies, for example, narrows your tunnel, reinforces fear, and is a demonstrably gross simplification of the complexity of reality. A belief that the world is full of opportunities expands what you can notice and act upon. Both are models, but their practical effects on your life differ enormously. Wilson often returned to Alfred Korzybski's phrase that the map is not the territory, because it captures something central to how beliefs operate. A map can guide us, but it always leaves things out. No map can include every blade of grass, every grain of sand, or every shift of weather. It selects what matters for a particular purpose, and in doing so, it also distorts. The same is true of our mental models. They are built from what our senses pick up and what our nervous systems can process, and then further shaped by the language we speak and the beliefs we already hold. When we forget this, we confuse the simplified version with the complex territory it was meant to describe. This is not just an intellectual mistake, it is a lived one. We start acting as if our map is the world itself, and our beliefs then reinforce that illusion. Over time, these beliefs gather weight, not only because they help us navigate, but because we come to see them as part of who we are. We attach importance and even prestige to them, often without noticing it. Many of us assume almost automatically that beliefs must be treated with loyalty and defended as if they were sacred possessions. Yet, if you pause to reflect, it is a strange assumption. Why should a provisional mental model be treated as beyond question? Why should we defend it as though our very worth depends on it? Wilson suggested that this unquestioned loyalty to belief is one of the main sources of human conflict. The problem does not lie in having different maps. Variety is inevitable. Instead, it lies in mistaking those maps for absolute territory that needs to be defended. When two people or two cultures treat their particular models as unquestionable truth, dialogue collapses. Each side sees the other not as holding a different perspective, but as simply wrong, deluded, or even dangerous. In this way, rigid belief becomes less a guide through reality and more a weapon we wield against those whose maps do not match our own. This led Wilson to coin the term reality tunnels. Each person lives inside a tunnel of perceptions, beliefs, and expectations. Within that tunnel, everything seems consistent. But step into another person's tunnel, and you encounter a completely different world. Politics, religion, science, culture, and even everyday habits create distinct tunnels. The Catholic tunnel is not the same as the Marxist tunnel, which is not the same as the scientific materialist tunnel. Each tunnel has its own internal logic. From the inside, it feels like reality. From the outside, it is just one model among many. Wilson did not present this idea to discourage people. On the contrary, he saw it as liberating. If we recognize that we are always inside some tunnel, we can experiment with stepping outside of it or peering into another one. We are not locked into a single way of perceiving. Beliefs are flexible. Tunnels can be changed. What looks like the only possible world is often just one version among many. One of Wilson's most famous formulations is what he called the thinker and the prover. According to this model, the brain has two functions. The thinker can think up any idea, any proposition. The prover then takes whatever the thinker believes and sets out to prove it true. Once you adopt a belief, the prover filters perception so that your experiences confirm it. If the thinker decides that people are hostile, the prover will find evidence everywhere of hostility. If the thinker decides that people are kind, the prover will gather evidence to support that. This mechanism explains why beliefs are so powerful. They do not just color experience, they select what counts as experience in the first place. Wilson's solution was what he called model agnosticism. This is the practice of refusing to believe any model completely. Instead of saying, "This is the way things are," one says, "This is a model that works for now." It is a stance of maybe logic, where one remains open to multiple perspectives. This stance requires that we let go of our identification with our beliefs. We need to stop attaching importance to them beyond their ability to help us navigate the world. Which can be hard, since debating and fiercely defending what we hold to be true are such ingrained parts of our culture. And we only need to log on to YouTube or read a paper to find countless examples of this. From Wilson's perspective, the way we identify with our beliefs and defend them at all costs is one of the most curious features of modern culture. What makes this so strange in his eyes is that people rarely stop to ask why they feel compelled to protect their beliefs as though they were personal property or even parts of themselves. And this is important. This strange way of treating our beliefs is so ingrained that it seems self-evident. But if a belief is only a model, then clinging to it with such intensity makes little sense. Yet in practice, many of us feel attacked when a belief is questioned. Wilson saw this as a symptom of confusing the map with the territory, and the self with the maps it happens to carry. The result is a culture where defending one's model becomes more important than examining whether the model is still useful or accurate. And as we have seen, different beliefs have made countless people bitter enemies and have played a major role in many large-scale conflicts. In quantum psychology, Wilson expanded this idea by showing how language itself can trap us in belief structures. Words like "is" encourage us to treat things as solid and permanent. He suggested experimenting with forms of language that emphasize process and relativity, so that our very speech patterns remind us that reality is not fixed. By tweaking language, we can loosen the grip of rigid beliefs and open ourselves to alternative interpretations. Yes, the way we habitually use language shapes our thinking and our relationship to the beliefs and ideas we hold. And yes, this can definitely be considered a habit. Wilson pointed out that most of us rarely notice how automatically we use words, and how those habits quietly reinforce the sense that our beliefs are absolute truths. When we say "this is the truth" or "that is wrong," the structure of the sentence itself creates the feeling of permanence and certainty. By contrast, shifting the language even slightly, saying "this seems true for now," or "that appears wrong from my perspective," undercuts the illusion of finality. These small changes may sound cosmetic, but they train the brain to treat beliefs as provisional models rather than eternal facts. For Wilson, this wasn't about becoming pedantic in speech. It was about discovering that the words we use are part of the software running our mental tunnels. If we change the software, even a little, the tunnel begins to open. Can you see how this is framed differently from what we are used to in Wilson's thinking? Beliefs and language are no longer treated as hard facts or accurate depictions with fixed definitions. Instead, they become flexible tools, useful in some contexts and less so in others. Wilson wanted us to notice that the authority we often grant to words and beliefs is misplaced. A word does not capture reality. It points to an experience. A belief does not mirror the world. It organizes perception in a way that makes the world navigable. Once you start looking at language and belief in this way, their grip loosens. They stop functioning as rigid containers and begin to function more like instruments, adaptable to different situations. Wilson saw this shift as central to psychological freedom. The moment you treat beliefs as tools rather than commandments, you gain the ability to test them, modify them, or set them aside when they no longer serve. He also pointed out the biological dimension of belief. Thoughts are not abstract. They trigger neurochemical processes. The hypothalamus, for example, releases peptides that influence the entire body. If you believe that you are threatened, your body floods with stress hormones. If you believe that you are safe and capable, your body responds with chemicals that support relaxation and healing. Beliefs are therefore not only mental constructs, but physiological events. They can affect the immune system, the nervous system, and even the way cells repair themselves. The reverse is also true. If your nervous system is chronically aroused, it will shape your thoughts and, in turn, your beliefs. A body caught in stress sends constant danger signals to the brain, which then interprets the world through that lens. Calm the nervous system, and new beliefs become possible. In this way, body and mind are not separate. They are two sides of the same loop, each continuously influencing the other. This leads to one of Wilson's most striking conclusions. Beliefs can create health or illness, limitation or possibility. The placebo effect is the most obvious example. People who believe they are receiving medicine often show real improvement, even if the treatment is inert. The nocebo effect shows the opposite. Negative beliefs can produce real harm. These effects reveal that belief operates not just on perception, but on the body itself. Wilson was careful, however, not to turn this into a new dogma. He did not claim that beliefs magically create reality in some simplistic sense. He warned against the idea that thinking alone can control everything. What he argued was more subtle, that beliefs shape perception, and perception shapes the choices we make, the opportunities we notice, and the physiological states of our bodies. These factors together create the conditions of our lives. Another important theme in Wilson's work is the role of belief in shaping society. Wilson noted that groups operate with collective reality tunnels. Religions, political movements, and scientific paradigms all depend on shared beliefs. Within each system, the prover function works collectively, reinforcing the tunnel by filtering out evidence that does not fit. This explains why debates between different worldviews often feel impossible to resolve. Each side is not just arguing about facts, but perceiving through different tunnels. This is furthermore amplified in our age, where algorithms keep feeding us more and more information from those we agree with, while filtering out those we disagree with. This also brings up another interesting phenomenon that deserves some attention and reflection. When you hold tight to a belief, it seems so flawless, while you can see all of the obvious errors in those beliefs that run contrary to yours. And the blind spots that you see in other people's beliefs are often correct. It's just that you likely have just as many. For Wilson, the way forward was not to abolish belief, but to learn to use it consciously. As touched upon, he suggested that one can experiment with adopting new beliefs, just as a scientist might test a new hypothesis. If you change your beliefs, you change what you perceive, and therefore you change the possibilities available to you. By playing with belief systems, you can expand your reality tunnel, discover new perspectives, and perhaps even reprogram your nervous system. This experimental approach is what he called metaprogramming the human biocomputer. Just as a computer can run different software, the brain can operate with different belief systems. Most of the time, we run the programs installed by our families, cultures, peers, and early experiences. But with awareness, we can begin to install new programs, test them, and choose those that produce more freedom and creativity. Wilson emphasized that this process is not easy. It requires courage to question deeply held assumptions. It requires patience to sit with uncertainty. But he believed that the reward is greater flexibility and a richer experience of life. Instead of being locked into one narrow tunnel, we can explore many, always remembering that each is only a model. In summary, beliefs filter every perception you have. Through the thinker and prover mechanism, they select what counts as evidence and prove themselves right. They embed as neurological imprints that shape how you respond to the world. They even alter your chemistry, priming your body with stress or ease depending on what you expect. And they crystallize into reality tunnels that seem unquestionable from the inside, while looking relative and arbitrary when compared with those of others. And what can we do about it? Wilson's answer was model agnosticism, treating beliefs as maps instead of absolute territory. That means practicing maybe logic, holding models lightly, and remembering that they are tools, not commandments. We can experiment with trying out new beliefs, just as a scientist tests hypotheses, and notice how our perceptions shift in response. We can cultivate awareness of how language itself nudges us toward rigidity, and change our habits of speech to remind ourselves that everything is provisional. And perhaps most importantly, we can laugh at our own tunnels, at the seriousness with which we defend them, and at the absurdity of mistaking maps for the world. That humor, for Wilson, was part of the freedom that comes with seeing beliefs for what they really are. Finally, in Wilson's vision, liberation does not come from having the right belief, but from understanding how belief itself functions. It is not about finding the one true tunnel, but about realizing that tunnels are tunnels. When you grasp that, you gain the freedom to choose, to experiment, and to play. Beliefs stop being prisons and become tools. The world opens up, not as a fixed structure, but as a field of possibilities, waiting for you to explore. What emerges here is a different way of approaching reality and our place within it. It is not less valid than the ordinary, unquestioned way most of us live, but it is less familiar. Few of us were ever told that we have a choice in how to interpret reality. As a result, we grow up with fixed mindsets, unaware that alternatives even exist. Wilson invited us to imagine beliefs not as hard facts etched into stone, but as models we can test, adjust, and discard if needed. Think of them as software rather than hardware. Software can be reprogrammed, uninstalled, or replaced with something more useful, and we rarely grant it importance beyond its function. To see beliefs in this light is to free ourselves from the need to defend them as sacred possessions and start using them as flexible tools for navigating experience. One great lesson in this is one of modesty and humility. Wilson never insisted that his models were final truths. He reminded us that we cannot know for certain what reality is, how it works, and that we never have access to the full picture as soon as there is some degree of complexity involved. His works also expose the strangeness of our attachment to and identification with our beliefs that most people take for granted. With this new relationship with our beliefs, perspectives that once felt impossible become available. Entirely new ways of thinking, feeling, and acting can emerge from something as simple as adopting a different model of reality. For Wilson, this was not just theory but practice. By experimenting with beliefs, by consciously trying on new tunnels, we can expand our range of perception and choice. In this sense, freedom comes not from finding the perfect set of beliefs, but from realizing that beliefs themselves are provisional, and that we are free to rewrite the code. If you'd like to explore further, you can find a playlist on the end screen with more videos on Robert Anton Wilson's ideas. There we look at related concepts such as reality tunnels and the principle that what the thinker thinks, the prover proves. You'll also see links to videos that approach beliefs from other perspectives, including the Toltec tradition and the work of Joe Dispenza. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe, and check out the description and comment section to see other things that we do. Thank you for your time.